Good evening. I'm Jamie Buckland with the West Virginia Few Families United for Education. And since yesterday, we have had a lot of new members in our Facebook group, and my emails are growing. My inbox is growing. I'm behind on responding, and we're hearing from families, we're hearing from providers who were intending to serve Hope Scholars. And so the Facebook group is growing, and our other social media followers are growing. And I thought I would take this opportunity before I head out of the office to address three questions. So, who are the West Virginia Few? What do we do, and why does it matter? And I'm going to try to keep this pretty brief. So, I have been homeschooling for 15 years. I have a son who lives out in Missouri. Ethan, I graduated him a few years ago from our homeschool. My daughter Emma will graduate this coming Sunday from our homeschool. And then I have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old that are still in my homeschool. And so when Ethan was younger, we began homeschooling, and sports were important to our family. And we were under the assumption that he would have sports access as a homeschooler. He would have access to public school sports. When we realized that that wasn't accurate, I felt ignorant, quite honestly, that I had just believed what someone else had told me, and the rules were fuzzy, and why didn't they have access exactly to what end? Like, who was the authority on that? And so I went to a homeschool day at the Capitol and met Mike Donnelly of HSLDA. And real quickly, I said, why don't we have access? And he just said, yeah, you'd have to lobby for it, fight for it. It's not each individual school denying you access. It's not this or it's not that. There's actually a case at Supreme Court level that ruled that it's not a right for your child to have sports access just because you pay taxes. And that brief encounter with Mike, where he directed me directly to state code or case law, and said, this is exactly why you don't have it, was kind of like a life-changing moment for me, because I came home and I started realizing that when somebody gives you an answer, you can't necessarily just take that as the gospel, right? Like, you have to exhaust it. And so my former chairman, I think, endearingly used to say that I was like painfully thorough. That's probably accurate. My husband would agree. And so that kind of changed the way that I approached opportunities, if you will, and educational opportunities. And then as my older children were getting older into middle school, we started launching these programs to homeschool alongside one another. And then that turned into us, kind of building these communities and partnering with other families to educate our kids. And all along that time, we're sacrificing, we're on one income. We've always only had one vehicle in our 20-year marriage. There was a brief time that we had a second vehicle that somebody gifted us, but that didn't last long. And then I think there was like a few months that we had a second vehicle, and our oldest got his driver's license and wrecked it. But so we've always sacrificed, right, to make that choice. And then so we had these communities, and then I started consulting other homeschool group leaders across the nation on how they could build these communities. But all of that's privately funded, right? Like, if you want to educate at home, or you want to enroll your child in a private school, you're paying out of pocket for all of that. And so not every family is in a position to actually exercise choice. And so then in 2019, I was asked by REACH, our local support group for homeschoolers, if I would step in as legislative liaison and communicate with lawmakers on behalf of homeschooling families. And we surveyed the families, and the one thing that they wanted was sports access. And so ended up partnering with some families early in 2020, pre-pandemic, and ended up voluntarily lobbying for that sports access bill. We passed it. And then the funny thing about legislation is when somebody passes something, then it has to be implemented. And so I've worked voluntarily for the last 2 years, partnering with Bernie Dolan at the WVSSAC and with Derek Lambert and now Dustin Lambert at the Department of Education, in ensuring that families understand the criteria that needs to be met in order for homeschoolers to have access at the SSAC. That's where I was this fall when I was asked to join the Coalition for Hope Scholarship in a more formal role and come on board, pick up this work full time and meet families where they were, to make sure that they understood what the Hope Scholarship Program was going to be. And that has kind of evolved. And so in early January, I, on a whim, launched a Facebook group to try to organize people together. It had one name, then it had another name, and we finally landed on West Virginia Families United for Education, the West Virginia Few. And that's what you now know as our Facebook group that just hit over 1,300 members today. Just recently, we brought on my daughter to help manage social media. And so we've launched our Instagram presence, and we're trying to figure out LinkedIn and Twitter. YouTube, we have a YouTube playlist where we've been interviewing providers. So who are we? We are families. Our board is made up of like-minded advocates, parent advocates, private school administrator Christine, parents Tia and Melinda, who believe in families having opportunity in the state of West Virginia, and to believe that our state should provide opportunity rather than limit it. And then my assistant Jessica, as many of you have become familiar with her, she worked for me over the years in my consulting. And so she already had all my passwords to all my accounts. And so she's transitioned in to be my assistant here at the Few. That's who we are, volunteer board. Jessica and I have been working, and now my daughter has joined us to help with social media. And my friend Lacey works on all of the graphics and communications. So that's who we are. And what we do is serve families. We believe that families have the right to accurate information, up-to-date information. We actually don't believe that we should just pat a family, a parent on the head and send them on their way. We hear plenty in the school choice movement from national advocates. We hear a lot from national organizations, and that's important, and it serves a place for sure, especially when you're looking to expand and protect school choice freedoms. But we don't always get to hear a lot from parents, and that's where our heart is, in that making sure that families are being listened to and that their voices are being amplified. So what we do is listen to parents and figure out how to get them the information they need to unlock the potential of opportunity. So we've introduced charter schools in West Virginia, Hope Scholarship, learning pods, micro schools. And so we create graphics and we do in-person events. I've held over 30 events since this late last year and attended events to make sure that we're meeting families where they are. And getting them the accurate information, and then working to help them navigate access, whether it's sports access for homeschoolers, Hope Scholarship, enrolling in a virtual charter school, having contact information for the brick and mortar charter schools, interviewing like Mike Donnelly from HSLDA earlier this year, just trying to make sure that you have accurate information. That's what we're doing, okay? And so now, in light of the Hope Scholarship rule, that has kind of transitioned into more of this advocacy piece. We've been really working heavily on implementing Hope Scholarship, interviewing providers who plan to take Hope dollars should the Supreme Court overrule this injunction, and should we get to pick up this work and move forward from where we've left off. So that's kind of what we do, is partner with families and make sure they know what's going on. And then we've been showcasing the work of providers. Our YouTube playlist, I think we're over 30 videos of interviews that I've done with providers, figuring out who they serve, how they serve them, and what that looks like for our viewers and our West Virginia families. And why is that important? Because we live in a state where life is tough. And I know I'm a little branded today, but the reality is that life is not so easy in West Virginia. And I heard that from Judge Tabbitt yesterday in the hearing, and I heartily agree. Life is tough here. We've been plagued with generational poverty, generational ignorance. We have a chip on our shoulder, and that's because we work really hard to be here. My husband works full-time for a utility company. He also owns and operates 3 dump trucks. And I've built these educational communities over the last 15 years here in Southern West Virginia. And it has been tough, and it has been expensive to do that. And our family has sacrificed to do that. What we realize is that not every family is in that position. And so how hard should it be for a parent in West Virginia to ensure that their child receives the education that they think is most fitting? That's the question. How hard should it be? How much should you have to sacrifice? Most of our families are working, both mom and dad, or you may have single parents. We have plenty of grandparents raising grandchildren because of straight up tragedy with the opioid addiction that our state has faced. These are all realities that must be considered when we talk about education in the state of West Virginia. I'm not here to point fingers at public educators or teacher unions. That's just not my gig. That's not my role. What I want to do is say, if the public school system isn't meeting the needs of a child, how hard should it be for their parent to figure out an alternative? What I heard yesterday is that it should be really hard, ridiculously hard. They need to be affluent. They need to be able to afford private education or homeschooling. They can exercise that choice. That didn't sit well with me. So why this matters, who we are, we're the West Virginia Few, parents, grandparents, professionals coming together. What we do is interview providers to make sure families know what's going on. We advocate, we try to get you accurate information. Why it all matters is that we believe you should be able to unlock that potential, and that it just should not be this hard to do it. We believe that families who are working and paying taxes should be able to have access to that state portion of the per pupil funding, that roughly $4,300, to use to educate their child at home. What some people may not realize is that not everybody who is going to keep their child at home and not enroll them full-time in a public school, not everyone wants to be the sole instructor of the subjects for that child. And so what the Hope Scholarship would do is allow you to outsource that. Sign up for an online math, sign up for an online science. And so when I hear people just be dismissive and say, well, you can educate at home, you have that choice, but maybe that $4,300 actually does make the difference. And when a child leaves the public school system or doesn't enroll in the public school system, where does that $4,300 go, or $4,600? Where does it go? We're just asking for it to actually follow the student. We're just asking for students to be funded instead of systems to be funded. And so that's what matters, is we believe that we live in a state where life is tough, and we would like to see our children invested in. And we would like to see the hard work and dedication of invested parents honored. And if they make the choice to enroll their child in a private school because that best suits that child, we believe they should be able to do it. We live here in West Virginia, 55 counties, 11 counties in the state don't have a private school option. The Hope Scholarship could be the vehicle which allows edupreneurs to work in their county to launch micro schools, learning pods. And so we want to be sure that the Hope Scholarship, that appeal gets filed and that is overruled. We want to share family stories, providers' stories to the best of our ability to strengthen those arguments, because we want to see this transform K-12 education in the Mountain State. That's who we are, that's what we're doing, and that's why it matters. So hopefully we can direct traffic to this video as a resource to show that's what's up. That's what we're doing. That's why we're making this noise. And as the opposition makes accusations surrounding yesterday's hearing, I would just say to West Virginia families to take heart, share your story with us. They're accusing this of being an outside agenda that's just coming into the state. And my goal here is to ensure that we are so loud that we completely abolish that argument that West Virginia families want this option and they're making their voices heard. So we are the West Virginia Few. Thanks so much for tuning in, and do reach out so you can share your story if you had plans to use Hope Scholarship or if you're simply in support of it for our state. So thanks so much. Have a great night.